This is Corey Jones with the Be Ready with Safety Man podcast. Join us every week for a new podcast. Follow us everywhere podcasts are played and on YouTube. Be Ready with Safety Man. This is Corey Jones. All right, welcome to Safety Man podcast. I am Safety Man Corey Jones. I'm joined by my partner, as always, Anthony Sicali, Ida Hoagie.
Yeah.
And Anthony, I really want you to give the real introduction to our guest here, because he's got a lot of qualifications. I can't remember all those 3-4 letter titles.
So, Brian Collins, I met him a couple years ago for a training he did for a department that I was at, and he taught us about tourniquets. And I'm going to tell you, I've got a lot of training over the years, and sometimes things are really good training, but it's not practical. I probably would never use it, or maybe it's a once-in-a-lifetime situation. When I got this tourniquet training, I said, wow, this is something that I could definitely see I would have to use at some point in my life, even working as an officer or off duty. And so I said, you know what, Brian would be great to have on our show because I learned a lot that day, and I want to kind of share the world to the world. So
Indeed.
So Brian, let's start. A little background. Where'd you come from? How'd you get to this line of work? And how'd you get to this point?
So I've been a career paramedic for 25 years, here and there. So that's where I started. I've been an EMT paramedic, and then I work for Cooper, and I do their outreach and their education. So I was explaining earlier that I work for various service lines in our hospital, like neurology, cardiology, obviously the emergency department, as well as trauma. So I provide education classes, mostly to pre-hospital providers. We're actually all emergency responders from police, fire, and EMS. Mm-hmm. So for trauma, this is one of the biggest classes I teach, and in my personal opinion, is probably one of the most important classes that I do teach. I've done CPR training before and everything else, but to me, this is by far one of the most important classes. The reason being is that somebody can sanguinate, they can die from major bleeding within minutes. Mm-hmm. And you call the 911 system, and you call for an ambulance, police, fire, and EMS. Law enforcement, you guys will probably be there, sooner than us on the EMS side. But even so, your response time is still going to be a good 5 minutes, maybe.
Yeah.
At the best time, right?
On a good day, yeah.
On a good day. So
Yeah.
you can bleed out in less than 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't stop the bleeding at your home or whatever incident that you're involved in, it doesn't have to be just from a shooting. It could be some other type of trauma from accidents, falls, etc. And that's what you learn in the class is you never know when somebody might be bleeding out to death. You just don't know. And it takes, if it gets a major artery, carotid arteries, your radials, brachials, your femoral arteries, which is the big juicy, plumpy artery down there,
Mm-hmm.
you'll be dead in 3 to 5 minutes. And if nobody's there to apply pressure or apply a tourniquet, dressing of some type,
Yeah, it's not good. So it's definitely super important for, like you said, everybody to know, and especially, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Hopefully, maybe the end is near, but the EMS system and the emergency room system can get stressed.
Yep.
And that's going to increase everybody's wait time. And then we have social unrest in certain cities where police, fire, EMS may not be able to get to them if something's going on. So that can also put people under stress. And we've talked about that on a podcast before about why we want people to be self-sufficient and know all these things. So that's one of the things that I find important about what you're saying is that you're going to give the average citizen the ability to buy time until they can get to that trauma center, right?
Yep. It's about exactly what you just said. It's about buying time. If you even slow the bleeding down enough, or if you are able to stop it completely until help arrives, that's what's key. And that's what's the most important thing. I started the training mostly, I targeted law enforcement initially because obviously you guys are in a career field that you're predisposed to a lot more dangers than the average person, right? And so with that, I keep always arguing that you can call for help if something was to happen to you guys. And I did most of the training, and I revolve it around mostly for while you're on duty. But as I said earlier, you don't know what can happen outside when you're off duty. And it's learning how to stop that bleeding, minimizing the bleeding as best as you can until definitive help can arrive. And that means basically bringing a tourniquet, wound pack dressing, the professional help that you need. And once you slap that tourniquet on, you truly are saving that person's life. Mm-hmm. You're buying them that time and the ability to live another day.
So one of the common questions I learned this when I first learned tourniquets probably 30 years ago when I was learning Boy Scouts 40 years ago.
Yep.
If you put a tourniquet on, you're going to lose the limb.
Yeah. So that is a great question. That question comes up pretty often in the class.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a fallacy. That's a myth. The new clinical research that comes out, and most of the trauma research that comes out, we get from the military side. Okay, because our trauma care comes from the military, and
which makes sense because obviously they see the first lines and they get the first line data. So
that's exactly the reason. So going back to having an amputated limb from a tourniquet application is absolutely false. The studies come out for 2, 3, 4 hours later, and there has been no amputations out there. Further out you go, you do have some neurological deficits, some numbness, tingling, etc. But I always tell in the class, what's the alternative?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Can you live with numbness or tingling, or you won't live at all?
Yeah.
Is what it really comes down to.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, going back onto the military and having military care, and that's where trauma care comes from. When you go off to the military, the first thing you're taught is basically this stop the bleed class, and you're given an IFAC kit because you are taught you have to treat yourself. You know, if you have a combat medic with you, that's all the better. But you have to learn to treat yourself or treat your buddies that are out in the field with you. Mm-hmm. And that's where this class pretty much originated from. It comes from that Committee on Tactical Combat Casualty Care, TCCC, for I think most people probably heard about it.
Mm-hmm.
So Stop the Bleed, that's the name of this organization that you are a part of?
So what Stop the Bleed is a national initiative by the American College of Surgeons on the civilian medical side. And they got this training and lumped it and called it Stop the Bleed and kind of focused it more for civilians to get that training out there. So think about when CPR first started, okay? It was a big push by the American Heart Association to get everybody trained in CPR. So now the American College of Surgeons is doing Stop the Bleed training and trying to make a big grassroots effort to get as many people out there trained as possible. Because the more people that are trained in learning how to stop life-threatening bleeding, more lives will be saved. Just like more people that are trained in CPR, more lives will be saved. Because in order to have good survivability chances from cardiac arrest, you need somebody immediately on the chest thumping on it, right, to circulate that volume of blood because the blood's not being circulated. And it's the same thing with Stop the Bleed, is that you need somebody immediately start applying compression, manual pressure to that site of the wound to either slow it down or completely stop the bleeding to give that person a fighting chance to live. So, but it's an effort by the American College of Surgeons, and I gear my training classes. As I said, what my job is at Cooper is providing education and training mostly to emergency responders, police, fire, and EMS. So I geared my training around that. But I have gone out, starting last year, which was my new initiative, is going out to the schools. And
that's how we were talking before about, yeah.
Yeah, and because if you think about what happens on, God forbid, a school shooting event or any type of traumatic event or any serious life threats going on at school, the first thing that they all do is go into lockdown. Everybody goes into their school. And I bring up the Columbine. We all know about what happened in Columbine. It took 3 hours for EMS to get into that school, to give the clearance for EMS. So we can't come in until you guys give us the green light.
Right.
I just told you can die in 3 to 5 minutes. What good is it if I come in even 10, 15 minutes later? Because all I'm going to do is just pronounce everybody dead and give a time of death. Mm-hmm. There was a science teacher in the school at Columbine and got shot, and they all dragged him into the class, and all the kids didn't know what to do or how to stop bleeding. They all watched him die and bleed to death.
And Columbine was a high school, so they're a little more.
It's a little different than elementary, where a high school student teaching them this, they'll be able to do this.
They will be able to do it. And I went to my local school district and provided this training to everybody in there, except the students. But I had all the teachers, administrators, custodian aides come in and receive that training, because we're not going to be in there. Yeah. And you guys on the law enforcement side are not going to be in there stopping bleeding.
We're going to be busy.
You're going to be taking out the shooter, the actor, right?
And people, I think people don't realize that law enforcement now are trained to go after the shooter and not stop for the victim.
Yeah.
That's the primary focus, and that
And
might
even-
take a few minutes to do that, 4, 5, 6 minutes.
And
You know,
even after you do, yes, because active shooting events last, 9, 11
Yeah.
minutes, right?
Mhm.
But even after you do that, you still have to secure the scene.
Yeah.
Because you don't know if there's multiple actors, if there's devices around. So even though you have somebody over there that's squirting blood out, you're not going to really jump over there.
Yeah.
And at that time, by the time you take the actor down, they've already succumbed to their
Yeah,
injuries.
and there's a
you know?
good incident. There was an active shooter in a movie theater down in Alabama, one of the southern states, and a lot of people survived because the officers had tourniquets that they were trained in how to use. And I know you'll like this. The officers actually applied tourniquets to some of the shooting victims that were in the theater, and they saved numerous lives, like 4 or 5 lives, just by doing that. And if you also remember the active shooter outside in Vegas, there were some military guys that were taking off their belts and ripping shirts
Makeshift
and pants
tourniquets.
to do makeshift tourniquets. So that's what I kind of wanted to ask you is, what's the first thing? You walk in here and one of these giant lights fell down on me and cut me right here and I'm bleeding. Like, what's the first thing?
Manual pressure.
So we're going to do manual pressure.
Yep.
Mhm.
Grab it here. What I do is I grab my knee and I would put it over here where that source of the bleeding is coming from. Okay? And depending on where the injury occurs is going to determine how you're going to treat it. So if you're bleeding from here and it gets your brachial artery, right? I'm going to apply direct pressure above it. Just like if you're bleeding, have a bloody nose, you don't pinch off the tip of your
it just
nose.
fills it up.
It just fills. You're just forming a dam, right? It's
Yeah.
not going to stop the vessel. You have to pinch the vessel off that's bleeding. That's why you pinch off the bridge of your nose. So if you're bleeding from here, I can't push down here because what happens is with the arteries, if it's completely severed, it's kind of like a rubber band under tension. If you pull a rubber band, have it under tension, and you snip that rubber band, what happens to the rubber
It's
band?
gonna shrink up.
It retracts back. It's the same thing like an artery. It's a high pressure vessel, right? Because it's got to circulate all that good oxygenated blood from head to toe. So if it's completely severed, it might retract back a little bit. So if you're cut here, it might shrink back here, and that's why I put the tourniquet above where that side of that hole is. But we talked a little bit earlier, if you take one in your carotid arteries, get cut up in here, or have some type of penetrating injury, you can't put a tourniquet around somebody's neck, right?
It's called,
Yes.
That's called a noose.
Yeah, it's a different show.
Will it stop the bleeding? Yes, maybe, but it's also going to stop them from breathing.
Yes.
So you apply manual pressure as best as you can, and with those types of wounds, you will have to pack the wound. You have to find some type of gauze, combat gauze, which is better, which is hemostatic dressing, and that's a whole different topic there. But you start packing the wound is what we call it. Basically, you're taking that material and just shoving it into the hole, completely filling it up as much as you can, and just making it as rock solid so the blood has nowhere to escape.
So if if I show up, just this, I have this in my pocket knife. Can I cut my sleeves off and start using my sleeves if I don't have anything else?
You can.
Sure.
But what I'm going to tell you is, during the training, learning how to apply pressure will probably be more effective.
Okay.
So, because in those sites, so if you get one, so here and in your armpit and in your groin area are sites that you can't put a tourniquet. Okay, those are called junctional sites. I would take my knee and I would put it right here in your armpit. And with that weight of my body weight, will apply enough pressure to squeeze down on that vessel to prevent it from pumping out blood.
Okay.
Because you want to compress the vessel is what you want to do.
One thing I definitely got out of his class was using the knee because it doesn't matter. He took the strongest guy in class. He said, all right, squeeze this for as long as you can and put as much pressure. And he has a machine that would show you the like PSI or whatnot on pressure.
It measures the pounds per
And then after like a minute or two, you're like, but you can put your knee down all day and you can still operate. You can use your radio. You can call for help. You can
shoot.
You can shoot. Or if you're just a civilian, you could maybe help someone else or, do something else.
Pick up your cell phone.
Pick up your cell phone.
911.
So your knee has so much more pressure on it and you're still able to function.
So like on the leg, you're saying now knee right in the femoral, like right in the junction
right in the
there?
cord. You just stick it right in there.
Okay.
And if they scream, all the better. Because if they scream, you know what that means?
They're alive.
They're alive.
And they feel pain. So that's
And they
good.
feel pain. It means they're feeling pain, they're alive. If they're not screaming,
That's not.
that is not a good sign.
Yeah.
So I saw, and you don't yell at me because I'm not the one who did it. I watched people do it on YouTube.
I have a friend, right?
I have a friend.
Okay.
Officers had to shoot somebody. They put a tourniquet on. The woman they were way out in the desert. So I don't know where the help was coming from. It was going to take a while. They were way out in the desert. She was complaining. The bleeding stops, and the officers took the tourniquet off.
Oh.
So that no está bueno, right? Not good.
No.
Okay.
So
Once it's on, right?
once it's on, it's on. You don't take it off. Because you don't know how long it's going to take for that person's blood to clot. There's so many varying factors. If a person's elderly, a lot of times they're on blood thinners, right?
Mm-hmm.
Aspirin is also technically a blood thinner. So with that, they might have problems with clotting. You don't know if they have a history. I mean, there are people that have history of difficulty clotting. You don't know that. So once a tourniquet goes on, it stays on.
Okay.
Because there's really no detrimental side effects as long as they're within the hospital within that window of a couple hours.
Right.
And they should be within the hospital within that window. So no harm, no foul. Put it on, leave it on. They tell you in the training that medics and the physicians are the ones that can turn off. In all my years of applying tourniquets, I have never taken one off. I have no reason to. And I always make the joke. It's like, you put the Band-Aid on, and then you flip up the Band-Aid to see if it stopped bleeding. Then you flip the Band-Aid back down real quick, right? We're not doing that anymore.
Okay.
Put the Band-Aid on, leave it on, take it off, and the next day or whatever if you're going to take a shower.
It's not going to make it worse, is what you're saying.
It's not going to make it worse.
So I don't need to let my cut bleed. I can have a Band-Aid on it for a day. I got my flu shot. They gave me a cute little Band-Aid.
with the little teddy bear on there?
Yeah, teddy bear. But he put it all upside down. I'm like, what? You're supposed to be a doctor. And he put my Band-Aid upside down. So I don't know.
So I want to talk about so we talked a little bit about what you would do with that one, but a commercial tourniquet. What is the one that you recommend? What does it look like? Are you able to show us a little bit?
So I have my own little IFAC kit that always goes around with me. It's always in my briefcase. I've got one in my car. I always throw one in my backpack when I go out, on daily routines.
I have to hold it up just a little bit there.
So
there you go.
the one I personally carry is a cat tourniquet. And from my training, I don't promote one tourniquet over another because when I'm working for Cooper, which I guess technically I am working for Cooper right now, I'm on the clock. I cannot promote one tourniquet versus another. But in my experience in using various tourniquets, I do like the cat, and in particular for you guys on the law enforcement side, in my opinion, is the fastest and easiest to self-deploy. Especially if you take one in the upper extremity and you lose function of your arm. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, using the cat is by far the easiest to self-apply.
And what do they run about? Like how much if someone's looking them up? What are they about?
So they should be anywhere between $35 to $45 a piece.
Okay.
You can, if you're getting it for your agency, you can get them in bulk, and you can talk to the vendors and stuff and see if you can bulk order. But that's usually a couple hundred, at a time. Yeah. But you should also be carrying more than one if you can. I know it's difficult for you guys in uniform.
Yeah, you got people that are on lines already have a million things going on.
Yeah, and that's the difficult part is that you're limited on space where you can actually have it. But I met some different guys, creative. They put it inside and tuck in their shirt. Mm-hmm. Just have it in there. They put it down in their boot. There's holsters that you can get.
That's what I got. I got one of those.
Ankle holster.
You're so proud of me. My last year, I had an ankle holster for my tourniquet. Man, I wish I knew him earlier.
So to get into that too, because one of our social media questions that we got this week was from Brian, and he asked, "What is an IFAC kit? Can you explain what it is and what it stands for and what's actually in it?"
So an IFAC kit is an individual first aid kit. So this is my IFAC kit, and I had a grant, and I went out and I purchased a bunch of these, and I made up my own IFAC kits. And at the time when I was able to go out and provide the training, I gave out these kits to a lot of the people. Unfortunately, you came at your agency came out afterwards. But did I give it? No, actually, did I give it?
No, we did not.
Okay.
Kits.
So
hold on. Here you go.
But in my IFAC kit, I just carry what I need of the basic necessities. And we talked a little bit earlier about first aid kits. And in the first aid kits, people get out these fancy first aid box kits. The only thing you really need in a first aid kit is a Band-Aid and an ice pack. Everything else is garbage to me, personally. And the problems that I have with all that stuff is there's too much stuff packed in there that you get lost in the box and you get lost in trying to find what you need. When it comes to an IFAC kit, you're talking about life-threatening emergencies. And I alluded earlier, sometimes you might have minutes to make a decision and to do something. And if you are opening up your kit and have to decipher through 20 different things in your kit, you're wasting time. You have to be able to reach it, open it, put it on, that's it. And it's got to be done. And once you take this thing out of the package, you should take about 5 to 10 seconds to apply. And think about that. 5 to 10 seconds in 60 seconds, in 1 minute, you just saved somebody's life. So, but in my I5 kit, I have my tourniquet and I have my wound pack dressing. And as I said, this is stuff that has to go in those sites where you can't put a tourniquet around. And that's all I carry. It's just tourniquets and wound pack dressing. And my other one that I throw in my expedition bag, so when I go hiking and stuff like that, I have a little bit more advanced stuff in there. I have a chest needle decompression. I carry aluminum foil because the foil wraps. Because believe it or not, when you have severe bleeding, you get cold. When you get cold, you don't clot.
Yeah.
So you have to keep the person warm. And that's why, like, we do the training. If it's 100 degrees outside, we turn off the air conditioner in the back of our truck, and we use blankets on patients because you've got to keep them warm.
Yeah.
Because hypothermia prevents clotting.
Yeah.
But I mean, those are a little bit more advanced things. But so I carry a few additional things in there, like a chest seal. But that's it. I don't have a lot of fluff and duff in there, and it's the same size kit, and just throws it right inside my bag. And my kids know how to use this stuff. It's not difficult training whatsoever. I have a 15 and a 10-year-old. They know how to do this stuff.
Yeah.
And as I said, towards the end of my lectures, I always give. You call 911, and do you know how I stop bleeding to an extremity? I just take a tourniquet. The same training that you're going to get.
Yeah. So you don't have any magic potion.
I have no magic equipment, no magic
Yeah.
skills. It's the same things that you're going to learn in this Stop the Bleed training class.
Now, can you talk about makeshift tourniquets? If I don't have that,
Yeah,
I'm
what are some
there.
good
'Cause,
examples?
we were talking earlier about belts. When I teach classes, I teach just a basic. I teach people to go to you or your type of a class. But when I'm talking to an office full of people, I'll tell them if you got a cord from the 10,000 computer monitors in there, you could probably tie that on or different things.
So a cord, it would be questionable. So people mention shoelaces, and a belt is one of the big things that people always say, like, I'll use my belt. The way that tourniquets are effective is the torque, the squeeze basically around the extremity, okay? So if you're not able to cause that squeeze, we're trying to pinch off a vessel, mainly the arterial vessel. Your arterial vessels and your veins in your body are deeply embedded inside your muscle fascia. And so you think about somebody's thigh, right? How much squeeze do you think is going to take to tighten around somebody's thigh? Think about Arnold Schwarzenegger's thigh, okay?
What the hell is going on here?
I shouldn't be thinking about Arnold Schwarzenegger. But,
Anyway, moving on. I'm not squeezing it. I know that.
but as I was saying, like, you can't manually squeeze, get your hands around that person's thigh, right? So that's why coming with the knee helps out. I tell people, like, if you have a broomstick, grab your broomstick and put that right down there and manipulate it back and forth to pinch off that vessel. So what happens with the tourniquet is you're causing what we call a circumferential squeeze around that extremity, and it's got to get shrunken as tight as it can. The problem with using a belt is how tightly do you think you can get that squeeze around somebody's?
Unless like I stood on it and I was.
You have to pull retraction on that, right?
Yeah.
You can't tie it off and put a belt and put it in a little belt loop. There's no way you're going to get that small of a circumference around there. So it goes back to the days when I mentioned earlier, like, yeah, I can use my manual hands to squeeze around your arm. Okay, you've done CPR, right? 2 minutes of hard, fast compressions. How tired do you get?
It burns you.
It burns you.
Yeah.
You get exhausted. Okay, I work out all the time, man. I'm a physically fit dude. Okay.
Yeah, I could tell.
There's no laughing at that. But so I'm going to get fatigued and tired just by forcing this compression. And then once I get fatigued and tired, my grip loosens. At the same time, there's blood all over there. So it's a little bit slippery. Okay? So once my grip loosens, the vessel starts to reopen again and it will start bleeding out again. In order for blood to clot, on average, it takes about it takes kind of more, like 15 minutes for the blood to start clotting.
Oh,
To
really?
start to clot.
Yeah.
Not for a clot to form, to start clotting. So you have to stay here for 10, 15 minutes. That's craziness. You're just not going to be able to do it.
So get the IFAC kit. Learn to use the knee.
Learn to use knee.
So if you have-
or some
Well,
type
are there
of
any
manual pressure.
makeshift tourniquets that we can use, like a
Like
the strap from
what would
your
you use
bag?
for the torque? What would you use if you had
So-
like a belt or a...
You were in the Boy Scouts. Okay. What do they teach you out in the wilderness what to do?
I don't remember.
Come on, dude, it was only a few years
the
ago.
strings for the tent, they told us we could do that, and then use the 10 stake
Oh,
to
did
turn
they
it.
do that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then use
Okay.
the 10 stake to
All right.
turn it, and then another string to tie the windset.
So I didn't
Well,
think about that.
didn't
10
you wear
state.
that little handkerchief thing?
Yes. I did.
Okay, so take your little handkerchief thing, or what I always tell people is go to your kitchen, grab all your bleeding control supplies. In your kitchen, everybody has a kitchen towel hanging up somewhere, right? For easy, quick grab for spills or clean, drying your hands off. Grab your kitchen towel and you tie it around the extremity. What's always next to the stove that people have?
My spatulas.
Spatulas, wooden
Wooden
spoons.
spoons,
Okay, I always make the joke. You don't have a wooden spoon, run out to Bed Bath & Beyond and get a nice big fat long wooden spoon and put it right there inside, next to your stove, right where the paper towel is.
And the knives, which we probably use to cut ourselves, right? Which is
Yeah, well, that's the one big thing I think people don't realize. Like he was saying, is like most of these situations aren't like an extreme active shooter. It's like you're cooking in the
accidents.
You're cooking and an accident happens
Yep,
at your house.
It's a freak accident that occurs.
so the towel, the spoon, and now I can make that and turn it.
So you cinch the towel around the extremity, grab the wooden spoon, you slip it underneath the the knot that you just made, and then you have to cause that circumferential squeeze, and you do so by turning and twisting, just like you do with the tourniquets. The reason why the commercial tourniquets are effective is,
If you want, you can put it on it, but just promise.
well, this one's not a trainer, so the only downside. But the only reason why the tourniquets are effective is this rod. This rod causes that, when you turn the rod, it causes the tightness, the circumferential squeeze, and shrinks the tourniquet around the extremity. Once you turn your wooden spoon, it does the same thing. The only difference is with the tourniquets, the commercial products, once you turn the spoon or the rod, you can't let go.
So you can get another towel and tie it.
Well, also with the commercial tourniquets, it's got a locking mechanism, so it doesn't unwind and unthread. If you're using a makeshift tourniquet, you can't let go.
Right.
Yeah, because it'll just like helicopter.
It would just helicopter and unravel. But I tell people, and when we do training classes and stuff, like you can lay the person down on that side, and then the ground will prevent it from. It depends on how long. It depends on how long your wooden spoon is. That's what I said.
Okay.
So get a big, long wooden spoon.
Okay.
The important part is once you turn that torque, right, and cause that circumferential squeeze, you should see the blood stop squirting. Once it stops squirting, that means that you've applied enough pressure and the vessel is no longer squirting blood out, right? Then you stop, and then help should be on this way. As long as it's a non-threatening environment, non-hostile environment, help should be there, relatively. Oh, it depends, I guess, where you live, but help should be coming on their way. And then as soon as we get there, then we'll apply our commercial tourniquets. We won't take that off. We'll put ours on above it, and then we can, take that makeshift one off. So
That's good.
But people mention shoelaces and stuff. The only problems with the shoelaces and like wires and cables and stuff is it's a very thin product, and when you cause a squeeze, you can start tearing the skin and stuff. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because you saw the simulator I have. So the simulator I have is an electronic simulator measures pounds per pressure, and it you got to think what the tourniquet's doing. It is causing a really tight squeeze, and it hurts. It hurts a lot because you're pinching skin. Okay, and with that, if it's something very thin, you can cut. You're basically causing an amputation. Is what you're doing because you're cutting through their extremity.
Yeah.
It's mostly tissue and skin. You're not going to go through the bone, but so you can cause cuts and wounds and lacerations and stuff.
Couple last things. Someone asked on social media about Train the Trainer. Do you offer a Train the Trainer program? So
with the Stop the Bleed, there's no real formal, getting signed off to become an instructor trainer. With the American College of Surgeons, they set parameters for people that can really be trainers. Obviously, EMTs, paramedics, nurses, physicians, etc. They included law enforcement in this past year's inclusion on going out and providing training. It's really once you receive the class, then you're capable of going out and being an instructor to teach. I'm only hesitant on that because you need the equipment and the supplies.
Yeah.
It's what you really need. And what you do is you go to the American College of Surgeons. website.
We'll put the link in the description. We'll drop it in there.
On the Stop the Bleed website, and you register yourself as an instructor, and you put in your qualifications that are on there, and then they like to keep a registry of how many people have been trained. So they want to try to see where the need is for trainers, etc., and just try to keep a tally of to see what's going on across the country. But so there's really no official certification process or anything like that. I have simulators, trainers, because you really need a bunch of tourniquets because you're going to have to put these on people, and they're going to have to learn what a tourniquet is. And I make sure I have a collection of over 50 tourniquets that were my trainers. I have simulation wound simulators where they have to learn how to pack a wound. And I mean, you saw that stuff. So there's a lot involved to properly put a class on together.
And you don't want to use one and train with it and then have it for a duty as well. That's
why I didn't use this, because once I use this, I can't use. It's only a one-time use only because it's stretched out beyond where the capacity to hold its to be effective. So once you use it, you can't. So that's why you can't practice with it. You can practice cinching it tightly, but you can't turn the rod.
Right.
So, but yeah. So when it comes to train the trainer, it's once you take the class, for the most part, depending on who you are. So for you guys on the law enforcement side, you can technically go out and provide the training. I only ask if you're going to do that to make sure you put a proper class on together. We do it at Cooper Hospital. Our classes are all free. We provide them at the medical school. They're an hour long. It's the same class that I gave you guys. Everything's on hold now because of things that are going on. But hopefully we'll be restarting that. I come out myself and I provide the training free. I'm happy to do it. That's my job. Is what I do. I'm passionate about it. I love it, and my goal is to get as many people trained as possible. If I can get every law enforcement agency, every school system, I will be a happy man, and I did my job. And I told you earlier before we started this podcast, I've had 2 people call me and told me that they applied tourniquet and saved someone's life. And I was telling you about the one state trooper that we trained at the academy last year, applied a tourniquet on a civilian, and it wasn't from a shooting or stabbing. He punched his hand through a window. He had a domestic with his girlfriend and punched it through. And what does everybody do when they punch through? They
rip it out.
Back, got his radial artery, squirted with blood. It was in a very rural area, and they weren't able to get EMS there quickly. He was the first one there, grabbed his tourniquet after receiving the training from us, and applied tourniquet and saved that kid's life. I mean, it's to the point where where my trauma.
It's great.
That's not from me. That's from my division chief in trauma, wanted to give recognition to the EMS crew that did that. And we found that when I looked back, it wasn't EMS, it was law enforcement that applied that. Yeah. So, as I said, it's not just for pre-hospital. It's not for EMS folks to do this training. Yeah. You guys are on the front.
So, like you're saying, the closer we can get to when the injury happens, the better trained that civilians are, and that we all are. As this pandemic has taught everybody, we kind of have to be more self-reliant, right? We're buying more toilet paper, we're buying all these different things. Get more knowledge and how to save yourself and each other.
With the big actor shooting going on, was it just a year or 2 ago? It seems like forever with everything crap that's going on now. But so this really took off about getting civilians involved and trying to help. It's the same movement back with the American Heart Association, getting CPR people, getting trained in CPR. So it's the same movement. What you're seeing is stop the bleed boxes, emergency trauma kits, or bleeding kits. And you're seeing them in public areas in case there is an actor shooter event, or in case there's some freak accident that happened. If somebody's at the mall and they fell down the stairs. Remember the guy that threw the kid over the balcony at the mall? Some crazy ass stuff that happens, right? Yep. So what they're doing, and what you're seeing more often, is public stop the bleed kits. And what they are is tourniquets and wound pack dressing.
One of the things that I got from your class too, and this is more civilian side of things, is now I keep one in my car at all times. So I have one in my car at all times. And the first thing I did, I had it in my first aid kit, which is in the trunk. But then I was like, oh crap, if I get stuck in an accident, it's me. I'm probably not gonna be able to get to my trunk.
Yep.
So now I just keep it right in my center console at all times. So that way, even if I'm jammed up, someone smashes in me, worst case scenario, I can have it within hand reach and I can actually get to it.
So I always implore that if you do go out and get yourself an IFAC kit or a or just a tourniquet, I always implore you guys, especially you guys on the law enforcement side when you're on duty and stuff, is it comes packaged up real neatly in a nice plastic bag. Is you got to take it out of that bag, okay? Get familiar with it of how you can quickly deploy it yourself with one hand in case you have loss of function of an arm, etc. And you can't have it in your first aid kit in the trunk of your vehicle.
Yeah.
Because if something happens, you're going to have to run out there. It's got to always be on you.
Yeah.
It's got to always be on you. It shouldn't even be next to you in your duty bag. There's a lot of people put it in the passenger seat and stuff. I can't stress it enough. It's got to be on you. I mean, that Philly cop years ago got shot at the traffic light.
Yeah.
Remember the guy
And
came up to him
he
point
put one on
blank?
himself. Was it the guy putting one on himself?
He
or?
put one on himself. So
Yeah.
he got out, chased down the perpetrator, right? And you see him running back to his car. It's because he was getting his tourniquet.
Yeah.
He didn't have it on him. So, but if you take one in the leg, you might not be able to move, run, or hide.
Yeah.
So, I implore people. You just have to carry it on you.
Last thing, how can someone get a hold of you? So if they want to reach out and they have a business or they have a school or something they want you to come out to, how do they get a hold of you? Like, do you have a website or an email, or where should they go?
I don't have a website per se. My email is Collins, COLLINS Brian, BRIAN at cooperhealth.edu.
We'll drop that in the description too.
Yeah, I mean, you can Google Cooper Hospital Stop the Bleed, and it's going to lead you to probably, I think, the trauma section, as well as my name is in there. So, as I said earlier, you can get the class from Cooper Hospital, and that's where I direct a lot of civilians. And we come out and we do on-site training. We've done church groups. I've done Girl Scouts. I've done athletic teams. Obviously, I've done a lot of law enforcement. And as I said, my big push this year was to go out to the schools. And I can't stress that enough. Religious organizations. We've done churches because of all the threats that are out there now, especially in this climate that we're in. You just don't know. And as I said, it's not for violence. You just don't know when it can happen. Freak accidents happen all the time. And from my lecture, the most likely scenario where you're going to see life-threatening bleeding to occur is going to be from car crashes. Because they happen all the time. And where your vessels are, they run along the length of your bones. If a bone snaps and cuts one of your vessels, then you're bleeding.
And again, you might be driving by. I mean, it could be 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes till an officer arrives at the scene. So if you have one in your car, you might be able to assist in that car scene if you can, safely.
And they might be trapped inside the vehicle.
Yeah.
So I can't stress it enough. This contraption, it truly saves lives. I mean, in my experience, you throw this thing on. I mean, there aren't that many things that I've seen and done that truly save lives, but this truly saves lives. As long as it goes on quickly and appropriately. I mean, because you can't just kind of just wince it on when the person starts screaming and begging you to stop hurting them.
Yeah.
Because that's some of the studies from the soldiers saying that the pain from the tourniquet was far worse than their actual injury. Okay? You can't, if they're still bleeding, you got to keep twisting it. Once it stops bleeding, then you stop and then you lock it into place.
And remember that. Remember that.
Yeah.
You're going to get that social pressure to stop. You're going to get other people that are in the area. Stop. You're hurting them.
You don't want to inflict more harm. I mean, that's
Right.
That's what we do. But you're going to have to if it hasn't stopped bleeding, because it's kind of the same thing. If you have the hose and you got the sprinkler on, you don't just partially turn off the sprinkler, right? You completely turn it off because you don't want the water. You want to stop the water from coming out. So it's the same thing. But yeah, I mean, and through the training, the training that I provide, I make sure that you guys understand that
you feel the pain,
what it feels like to have a tourniquet on.
Yes.
And hopefully you won't get deterred from calling me to come out.
Yeah.
I'm not deterred yet, so I'm going to call you.
But so if you can Google me, Brian Collins at Cooper Hospital, Stop the Bleed. You guys said you'll put my information.
Yeah,
up there
we'll put it
on
all in the
screen.
description,
Yep.
and then feel free to reach out to him and drop a comment below. Let us know if you do have him out, how it worked out, or provide some pictures and share with us. We'd love to see it. Corey, you want to give your little information real quick?
Yeah, Corey at SafetyMan, all one word like Superman, safetyman.co is my email address. You can ask me any questions, any show notes, show ideas that you want to see in the future, and just give us some comments. Let us know how you like the shows that we're actually putting on for you. You can know our goal is to try to make you self-sufficient and safe and be able to help yourself first and then help your neighbor next. So like, follow, listen, share, subscribe to Safety Man Podcast. Anthony, Brian, thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Stay safe and be ready. All right.
Good.
Yes, sir. Very good.